but Lisa, what I'm hoping is that it will record the share screen, because I wanted to use the share screen a lot. So if that's not working, then it's just going to be kind of going back and forth to nothing. But it is what it is. Ida, Lisa, do you guys have anything you want to talk about? I can kind of see the comments over here. Anything from my Facebook Lives or anything like that? I did 3 Facebook Lives last week on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and talked about some pretty basic stuff, but I think they were pretty well received. Did pretty well with those. Anything on your mind, Ida? How's your practice?
It's very prominent.
Prominent. Okay.
Yeah. Pretty good most of the day, and then the evening kind of wears away a bit. But I'm aware of that, so
Segment.
yeah, go for the low-hanging fruit in the evening, as Donna would say.
Yeah, and I think one of the trickiest parts of our spider's web is that we're so used to doing something because we expect a particular derivative. So does that make sense? A lot of the things that we do, we're doing it because we expect something out of it. I think that, again, that dynamic isn't the end of the world. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but when that dynamic gets out of balance, then we start looking at everything expecting a particular derivative and a particular result. So even with this practice, you just have to do it, and over time it will accumulate, and you'll be able to look at it and say, oh, okay, there's that, I can see it better. Does that make sense? So the practice will work if we do it, but if we expect it to do something, it may not meet our expectations, because that's not how this really works.
No, I had a feeling the other morning, and I wanted to write it down. Of course, I didn't write it down, but I had this feeling of things clicking into place, and really, and not that you need to understand, but experientially understanding that what we're doing with the tricks is creating our own conditions, and then feeling the feeling of the conditions that we've created. And hopefully the conditions that we've created through this is peace, and then to feel the feeling of the things we've created rather than the outside conditions creating feelings in you. Does any of that make sense? We're creating our own conditions with tricks of attention, and then feeling the feeling of the peace in our mind from the tricks. And I think what you've been saying lately, and Lisa mentioned it too, is to put your attention on that feeling of your relaxed mind. I'm thinking of that feeling of relief and peace from uh, not thinking as much as I used to put it in simple terms. But I really got that very clearly the other morning, that the more deliberate you are about your where you place your attention, that it just creates a feeling, and I can begin to get the feeling now. I can begin to place my attention on the feeling because I can feel the feeling that it's creating.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, yeah, I get that. I don't really have anything to add to that, Ida. I mean, I do. There's some things that came up, but it could go into a 2.5 hour spiel. There are some things that I think could. I I would like to make a recommendation,
Yes,
to
please do.
sign up for a one-on-one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there is definitely, when we start to get into Seers training, I do believe that Seers training will be best delivered in person, and then also maybe aspects of hydrostasy, because there's ways to use the voice of power, especially towards the evening and when you're starting to lose the deliberate attention. So yeah, I think I could help you navigate this. And not that you necessarily need help, but it could expedite things potentially. It could save you a little bit of time, in air quotes. But yeah, I definitely have some ideas for that. but the ideas that I have may not be relative to the entire group. So I think that would probably be more appropriate for a private setting, if that makes sense. Not because you're going to be sharing embarrassing information or anything. It's just when we really start focusing on the feeling, there's some things that are still important. Is even though that you're able to find the feeling, you may not always be able to do that. So then the practice goes back to those basic steps, and then you kind of oscillate between the two, and then eventually it's all feeling. And so I think that you could be getting, and it is so individual, yeah, but the principles are the same. So we can work with those principles. But yeah, that's ultimately the bottom line is that's amazing. So that's really great news, Ida, that your practice is definitely starting to get to some of the areas of training that I mean, I think I have prepared a little bit. I don't know if guidance is the right word, but just assistance, just something that there's a certain point where it's all empowerment. So everything is kind of just, oh, that's a good idea. Okay, I'll take that. Or no, that doesn't really sound like it's for me. You can keep that. If that makes sense. All right. Hey, Jerry. Hi, Mike. Hey, Karen. What's new with you guys? Anything going on? Got a little bit of a conversation ready? I really like the topic that Ida was going into, though, because it's really getting into what I can actually show you that. And I did post it in the group there, but where's that button? Oh, the button's behind the window bar. Okay. So I could show you this really quickly. So if you can see this, can everybody see this? What Ida is talking about in T, the complete practice, is the Seers practice, is when we really start to, our focus of attention is now going on, when we say a feeling, Ida, we can be specific. Specifically, when we say feeling, we're talking about your perception, your cognition,
Your
all of
feedback.
your feedback, but also your input, your feeling input and feedback. So feedback is your emotion, but in a manner of speaking, you are feeling the light. It can be very difficult for somebody who is in severe psychological suffering to understand what we're talking about, Ida, and so that's why sometimes these subjects are best for either private settings or when we start doing hydrostasy and Seers training. But so ultimately, no matter what we talk about and how we talk about it, everything is felt. That is a principle. So the word felt means to perceive. Does that make sense? You can feel emotions. You can feel somebody punching you in the mouth. You can feel a memory in a manner of speaking. But when you feel the wind on your skin, you are perceiving it. When you feel the smell in your nose, you're perceiving it. You're processing it. It's all feeling. We use different words to try to divide things up, but ultimately feeling equal perception. Does that make sense? Jerry, does that make sense? Your brain is creating your perception. It's the assemblage point. We talked about this last week. Does that make sense, Jerry? Mike, make sense? We have essentially the brain, but all of it is working together. It would be erroneous to separate them, but for the sake of discussion, sometimes we do, because they've already been broken up. So we're just working with what's already occurred. It's already happened. So, Ida, there comes a time where this practice moves into feeling. I mean, there's no other getting around it. So yesterday, when I was at Starved Rock, I used Starved Rock as an opportunity to like vacation. The Starved Rock, and I'm putting this in air quotes, hasn't changed. Of course, in every way possible, it has changed. But it to my eyes, to my perceptive ability, it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be pretty darn similar to the last time I was there. You know what I mean? Just for argument's sakes. We just went to a forest preserve. It's a state park. It's one that we've been to many times. But Jerry, do you remember the story when I was going to a state park and I had no impending doom, but I wasn't able, I just didn't feel peace. By the end of the walk, I didn't feel good. I was driving home or riding home, and I had that aha. I wasn't doing anything with my mind. It was that park. So we went to the same one. So I was able to, in a way, now I don't go out of balance with this, so I won't violate principle, but I can't help but notice the difference in the quality of my mind between then and now. And I have been there a few times in between, and I'll probably go back. But the difference, the sheer difference in the quality of my own cognition was, to me, absolutely astounding, because I'm just instantly able to see beauty. I don't know any other way to say it. It's just a feeling, and I can just find it in everything. And that might just sound like woo woo, oh, Ernest is talking all mushy mushy again. Fine. But it's a feeling, folks. And I can modulate to that feeling anytime I want to. And it literally is just the direction of my attention, because I can find it in everything. So wherever I find my attention, then I find a different quality of beauty. I know Ida is, this makes sense to you. I know it does. So the Seers practice, I organize a practice of paying attention and highlighting those feelings. And I'm doing it all the time. It's a huge part of hydrostasy as well. Does that make sense, Ida? So I won't go too much into that. I'll start to but what you're talking about is this section of the practice, and I call it the Seers practice. So we have basic alignment, counterbalance, warrior training, and then the Seers practice. This isn't a whiteboard, so I can't like circle stuff and stuff. But yeah, you get the gist. Over here I have hydrostasy. I have divided hydrostasy into the 4 stages of my own training so far, I guess you could say, my own practice, my own example. The Mindspace Mindfulness Academy is divided into 4 primary categories, and we'll be talking about those in depth in the free classes. And then just some other things that we've put together: the Rings of Power, Park Style Tai Chi, Hunting Power, and the Elegant Grain Mindful Movement. That's kind of all I got to offer right now. Hope that's okay, but that's pretty much it. So Donna says redirection occurs faster and more fully with accumulation and momentum. And the voice of power is absolutely essential. And that's why I have taken what we haven't highlighted so far, and I've created a new area of focus called the Mindspace Academy. The Mindspace Academy is focusing on certain little areas that so far I haven't really blown up, including the rule of 3, because I wanted to make sure that there was a foundation for T that wasn't necessarily interfacing with our own word-based cognition. Does that make sense? I wanted an aspect of T that was very basic, and I call it basic alignment, fox walking, 4 modes practice, simple stuff, folks. Not necessarily interacting with your own stream of thought. In the mind space, we are almost instantly. I introduced that right away. Does that make sense? I didn't mean to pop my knuckle. I was just massaging it there. I don't pop my knuckles, but it popped. Does that make sense, Donna? And
makes sense.
So the reason I mention that is because this practice, as it gets towards feeling, redirection occurs because you're cognitively aware of the present moment, and you're able to redirect it sooner and sooner and sooner. And eventually it doesn't require word-based verbal cognition. You feel it and you can just redirect. And then the voice of power becomes a creative voice that you didn't necessarily expect. In the beginning, and as we're practicing this, the voice of power can be something that we're telling ourselves on purpose in order to propel our practice further. Does that make sense? Using the voice of power. I used to call it telling yourself true things. I still do. But we call it productive cognition, substitute dialogue. We've been talking about this from day 1. Does all that make sense?
Sure, it makes sense. It's just, you can't help but notice it comes as a feeling, and you redirect if it requires redirection, because if you're noticing a feeling that is, I don't know, out of balance, or a pull towards a heaviness or drag or coasting or whatever word you want to use, you can redirect without the words. It's almost like flying a plane or flying as if you were flying in air. You notice that there's some drag and you redirect to, I think just with accumulation and momentum, the preferred feeling of no resistance is something you navigate without words. You feel the resistance, and it's usually thought or and perception. Everything's subject to your perception. So right now there is pain in the shoulder of my body, and it has been for some time, and I think it's going to require some surgical correction. But whatever it is, whatever I'm doing in the present moment, when I feel some resistance, I adapt to it, to a place where there's less resistance. And if that's in my mind thinking about that damn shoulder, or if it's just my position, whatever it is, I can navigate it. I can feel the resistance more quickly, or the pull towards it more quickly, and I can adapt to it more quickly. And that's directly proportional to my practice. It's accumulation of momentum. It's all principle. It's really all principle. And then I can't help but notice in hindsight. And then I can't help but notice in hindsight, like when you revisited the place that you had gone to, you had some comparison because you'd been there before. So there was some structure of comparison, and you couldn't help but notice that with accumulation and momentum and your practice, which is now in what we are calling hydrostasy, or you are calling hydrostasy, there was a difference. And the place itself, of course, has changed somewhat, but because everything is changing, but you noticed it in hindsight almost. You couldn't help but notice in the now moment in comparison to something else you'd experienced. I find that works with everything. It works with pain. It works with, I don't know, everything. It works with all navigation. It's directly proportionate.
Sure. Yeah. Now you several times though you use the word resistance, and I'm just curious, you're using that word to describe something undesirable? So a feeling that is undesirable, or I'm resisting that? Because the way that I'm just asking because I use it differently.
Resistance as, I guess it's just the way I navigate now. It's a feeling, and when the feeling, I can feel the difference between lighter, smoother,
and that's the word you're using for resistance?
Yes, resistance is when I start to feel lag or heaviness, or I don't overanalyze it. And sometimes I do. Sometimes I overanalyze it, but I don't have to analyze it to figure out what it is to move out of it.
Mm-hmm. So someday I hope that you teach tea. I really do. That's just, I'm being straight up. Like, I hope. I'm not going to manipulate. I'm not going to try to control. I'm not going to tell you what to do. The world is yours, but I can say that I do have a preference in the universe. So I would love, Donna, for you to teach tea one day.
I think I teach it all day long. I mean,
yeah, you do.
Now it's the conversations that I'm having all the time. Like, people come in for information, and a third of the answer that I give is information related to whatever they're asking me, usually health related or emotionally related. And the other 2/3 is principle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, with that said, though, Donna, could you be resisting the way that T uses the word and be feeling pretty good, be feeling maybe excited? Maybe you're having a hell of a fucking time.
I'm not sure the question.
Okay, so the question is, the way that you defined resistance, it sounded like not preferable, that it's not a good feeling. And that's okay, I get that. I can understand that would very likely be a form of resistance, even as I use the word in T. But could resistance, according to T, also be in Las Vegas on the high flying disc? You just got an award. You are going in towards a vacation, and you're going around the world. We have words for what occurs when we do this. You've created segmenting around it, but the way that the transcendental embodiment approach uses the word resistance isn't necessarily something that doesn't feel good.
Oh,
Resistance can feel amazing. It can.
It doesn't feel good eventually. I refer to resistance as something that's pulling me out of balance other than the normal navigation of life. Navigation of life isn't always it's always navigation. You're always doing something. You're always engaged. It just, when it starts to feel like work, or when it starts to feel heavy, it could be being out of balance because I'm on the high flying disc and I want to live like that all the time. And, oh, something broke, or my car needs to be repaired. And that could be something that pulls me away from it. And then I see it. I think when you exist in any state of being in an extreme, resistance is going to come. And however I perceive that, I've learned that less words about it and more feeling about it helps me navigate quicker.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll stop beating around the bush. The way that I use the word, it means that we're not doing the third pillar. That is resistance in all forms or fashion. Resistance begins the second I lose connection to the present moment. So let's say, Jerry, you send me a $10 million paycheck and you're just like, Ernest, you've done a good job this month, buddy. Here's a $10 million check. And I get so fucking excited in that instant that I see the check, Jerry, that I lose my tricks of attention. I lose my points of attention. I'm not paying attention to my body. I'm not paying attention to my mind. I have instantly begun the act of resistance. It might not be active resistance. It's very likely passive resistance. I'm unconsciously, hey, I live this life, I have this mind, and we can do a lot with $10 million, right, Jerry? So before inner guru starts whispering that $10 million is too much, Donna, I'm probably going to get excited about that initially. So the very moment, according to the transcendental embodiment approach and the way that I teach, and maybe I just need to think of a different word, but the very moment, Jerry or Donna or anyone, the very moment that I lose deliberate intention and deliberate attention, the third pillar, I am resisting the now moment. And the feeling associated with that is, something that we would post on Facebook as being the high flying vortex. You see what I mean? Now, true, the longer I exist there, to Donna's point, it will result in suffering. So the longer that I exist there, eventually it's not going to be a good feeling. It's not going to be the high flying disc. However, the way that I use the word resistance, it is associated to a feeling, but it's not necessarily the feeling of good or bad. It's the feeling of deliberate mind. The third pillar has a deliberate feeling, right, Ida? You were talking about that earlier.
Sure,
Ida,
but I'm not in hydrostasy, so
no, that's fine. Yeah,
I feel the drag, and then I notice that my mind. Then I can see it, but I feel it first. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, so this isn't anything personal. It's just the way that the word resistance is used typically is when we're not feeling something preferable. That's what I'm hoping to differentiate here. So, and I'm not really. This isn't the absolute definition of the word, but when I'm using the word resistance, I just want you guys to know I'm not necessarily talking about something that doesn't feel good. Of course, it doesn't feel good to me anymore. Anytime that my third pillar isn't active, that doesn't feel good. But that's not necessarily what I mean. That's not a definitive characteristic of resistance. The definitive characteristic of resistance is a mind that is not engaging the present moment, either purposefully or unconsciously. Does that make sense? Is that simple definition of the word resistance as far as, this practice, even mind space, because it comes from T, the complete practice, or T, the methodology. And this isn't necessarily semantics. It's an important point. It is such an important point that I am not associating resistance with something that feels negative or something that needs to accumulate before it feels negative. Although when I'm not present, I don't like that feeling. I don't like the feeling of when I'm going away from my body. And eventually I'll use just that as a gauge of alignment. I don't need an emotional scale. Do I feel as if I'm going towards presence or away from presence? And I mean the present moment, mindfulness, and so are my 3 pillars active? But the reason I'm making this distinction is because I want to make sure, and again, this, Donna, this honestly has nothing to do with you.
Oh, it's
I'm
great.
just,
It's great.
yeah, I just want to make that distinction in terms of the practice, because when I use the word resisting the present moment, I do not necessarily mean that you don't feel good about that. You know, Jerry, you could be resisting the present moment and you still feel fucking fantastic until you don't. But you were resisting the present moment the moment the 3rd pillar was no longer active. Does that make sense? So if my present moment involves a $10 million check, why would I not be right there in that moment with that? You're just meaning in that moment you weren't being deliberate. Exactly. Because you switched your attention to that check. So there's a difference. I can be excited, Jerry. I'm not declaring war on excitement, but there is a difference. And this is what we can really focus on with the mind space. Focus on the feeling of deliberate attention. Do it, focus on that feeling. And so there can be a difference, Jerry. Yes, I can receive a check and be excited and maintain my points of attention, can't I? That is a valid statement. That you could send me a $10 million paycheck. I could be totally in the moment with that check, feel really great, and still have a deliberate point of attention. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And I would not be in a form of resistance necessarily, right? Because my tricks of attention are active.
Right.
Right? So Jerry, am I more or less likely to get into the extreme of an imbalance if I am still maintaining my points of attention while receiving the check and while still being excited? Am I going to exist in excitement, do you think, for very long, or am I going to be able to mindfully find my balance, my hydrostasy bubble? Yes, exactly. That's my point. And that is so important. That's why I'm mentioning this. I'm honestly, this is not semantics. I don't care. I don't give 2 hoots about semantics. But this is such an important point because we have made the erroneous, it is erroneous that we have to feel bad before it's resistance. We have to feel bad before we need to make adjustments. No, am I present? Am I mindful? Am I choosing my point of attention? At least 2 degrees, the answer is yes or no. That is this practice. And the emotional scale can be valuable in the beginning when we're not used to like Donna said, she's not practicing hydrostasy. And I actually even wasn't, I'm not talking about hydrostasy. I'm actually just talking about the core T methodology and how I use the word resistance. But
I understand.
Yeah.
What I meant was I don't have as much accumulation and momentum as you do in hydrostasy. I don't have that yet. So where I tend to do very well setting up where I know there's battlegrounds, when it's something that feels bad, I will notice and correct much more quickly than I used to. But like yesterday, I was playing with my niece's children, Eugene's grandchildren, and that had lent to me, lends itself to feeling good. That's a high flying disc, if you want to call it that, because I was not practicing. I found that I started to feel tired and drained. And I noticed it wasn't just because I was chasing 3-year-olds around. It was because I noticed that I wasn't practicing. I was relying on their energy for my attention instead of practicing. So I started to feel resistance. And yes, I am using resistance in the term of I had to feel bad first, because that's where I am in my practice. I coasted while I was playing with them because it was easy to coast. And I realized I wasn't present.
Yes, that makes sense. So it's that saying that you don't know you have a stomach until it hurts type of thing.
Exactly.
But yeah, and I get that. But just for the sake of clarity, and then just because Ida was talking about, kind of the Seers practice, just to cross that divide. Whenever
I'd
I
like
use
to clarify, I'm not there. I'm feeling that in moments. It's getting longer. I can sense it throughout the day at different times, but by no means am I in that feeling all day. I'm definitely not in that feeling all day. Just
Yeah,
sometimes. Yeah.
and I also think that that's an erroneous scale too. It doesn't have to be all day, but eventually it will be. It's fine. It's just, yeah, it's a journey. All right. So any questions about that? So what Donna says makes perfect sense to me. And there was a time where I couldn't feel the resistance until I wasn't feeling good. I get that. But just for the sake of the definition and how I use the word, resistance is the moment we lose our third pillar. And you could still be feeling good the moment you lose your third pillar. It's just until you don't. Yeah. And so feeling resistance is going to be very different for Donna right now. And this is okay, to make that comparison. I get it. So for Donna right now, we do need to feel a little bit of the unwell, and then that's kind of the catalyst to redirect back to the practice. And I totally get that. There will come a time where simply not being present doesn't feel good, or it doesn't feel, and this is the word that I would use, is alignment. It does not feel in alignment. It doesn't feel in flow. And I can feel that immediately. And I don't need to analyze why. The moment I don't feel, or I feel like I'm going away from alignment, or by the word alignment, and I don't want to get into a 45-minute spiel about the definition of alignment according to T, but it is when you are connected to the present moment, you're moving with it rather than against it. You're adapting to it. It's kind of a dance, a collaboration with the present moment. And when we're dancing and collaborating with the present moment, that entire dynamic begins to change. And I can feel the moment that my third pillar starts to go away. And although I wouldn't say that feels bad, like, how I'm used to describing the word bad, it feels bad now. I guess the word bad is to degrees. So the moment I start to lose my third pillar or go away from it, because I don't really lose it anymore, but the moment I feel that hydrostasy and I'm starting to go away from my center, then I just go back to my tricks of attention. So there's no evaluating it, trying to understand it, anything like that. I'll use voice of power if I have to go back to the present moment, at least 2 degrees, with what I call degrees of awareness, and that would be a higher degree of awareness, even to where I have to have multiple points of attention. That's called the rule of 3, if necessary. And it can be necessary. I'm sure I'm going to be doing the rule of 3 again, maybe even today. Who knows? All that makes sense? Easy peasy, right? So if you guys want to look at this, I posted it, but this is essentially the chart. This is all I'm offering currently. The T core methodology is in the center. That could be defined as presence, mindfulness, and deliberate attention. That's the T core methodology essentially is the 3 pillars. That's it. So hopefully that makes sense. And then, so that breaks down into T, the complete practice, and its 4 sections, hydrostasy, its 4 sections, and the Mindfulness Academy and its 4 sections. Remembering to choose, and by remembering to choose, I mean remembering to choose presence. The rule of 3, the voice of power, and feeling the mind space. Hunting power is under development, but I do have a way to deliver that as a practice if you're interested, if somebody wants that. All right, so moving along, there are some unique features of this practice, and I just wanted to highlight them for a minute. No, remember to choose is not the first of the 3 pillars. No, the 3 pillars is remember to choose, and then the rule of 3, and then the voice of power. I guess remember to choose presence is kind of the first pillar in a manner speaking. Remember to choose presence. Yeah, so I guess that is practicing the first pillar. Yeah, I guess so, Jerry.
Well, I guess I just meant for people just starting, those first 3 pillars got to come in somewhere. They got to be there.
Oh, it will be. Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then also, Jerry, if we're going to talk about the 3 pillars, that's also it comes in everything, because that's the T core methodology is the 3 pillars. So hydrostasy will contain it. All other practices, the mindful space, do you see how that works? So the T core methodology will be in everything that I teach, and the 3 pillars is core methodology: presence, mindfulness, and deliberate attention. And that's kind of why I went into the spiel of resistance, because that's also core methodology. That a mind that is not engaging the present moment is in, for lack of a better word, resisting it, either passively or passively, you're not meaning to, or intentionally, and that's called cherry picking. So moving along, we have some unique aspects of T, and I say unique, but I don't really know, so it's fine, it's just a word. But there's probably some aspects of this practice that are consistent in other practices, very likely. But are you going to be able to find all of this in one space? I don't know. So this is applied mindfulness, and that's kind of what we're talking about today in today's class. All right, so this is kind of getting into one of the first things, and then just I'm going to skim through these just for the sake of time, and then you could tell me if you have any questions, or I'll just ask after each one. So applied practice, and the reason I use the word applied is because it's action-based. There are a lot of things in the world that are offering a lot of philosophy. This, I could go on and on about this, and I'm not going to compare to any specific other practices. I'm just saying this is kind of what sets T apart. I think it's a valid discussion. And this is something that T does. It's something that T offers. But T is prepared to meet you with more than just philosophy. So we are going to do more than just talk about, how the world is waking up, and we're going to talk about more than just the world moving into the 5th dimension, and we're going to do more than just talk about anything. We're not really talking at a certain point in this practice. There is an action step. Where is your mind, and did you put it there? That is T core principle. That's it. Where is my mind? Did I put it there? Do I have an active 3rd pillar? The answer is yes to no or no. It can be 2 degrees, and we've talked a great deal about that, but it is yes or it is no. If you're pretending that yes and no is more than anything other than yes or no, then you are hustling yourself. Your attention is either chosen on purpose, and you have put your attention there deliberately, intentionally, and willfully, and that has a feeling that I would love for you to focus on, because when you're not feeling it, you can use that as a gauge. And then we can dissolve the whole emotional scale. That's not necessary. Am I present? Am I moving towards presence, mindfulness, and deliberate attention, or am I moving away from it? That has a feeling, and that can be my only scale. That's all I need. Eventually, that may not be your current lowest hanging fruit, and I totally get that. So does that first one make sense? This is an active practice. Any questions, comments, or concerns about that? It's a super important point, and I'm not, if there is something out there that is entirely philosophy, it's called philosophy class, and that's fine. I'm not declaring war on philosophy classes. Maybe someday I'll have to teach a philosophy class, who knows? But T is a complete practice, not a complete philosophy. Well, it is a complete philosophy as well, because the practice is reflective of a philosophy in a manner of speaking, sort of. But it's a doing, it's an action. All right, cool. So that is a distinct characteristic of T. Don't have to compare it with other practices if it's not necessary, but it is a distinct characteristic of T. There are aspects of T that will make a great meme on Facebook, but it's not the meme. Where is your mind, and did you put it there? This is an applied practice. And it is technique based. So when we say applied practice, if there's no technique, there's no delivery mechanism. Do you see how many times, again, okay, so I do make comparisons a lot. That is something that I do a lot. But that is because of my devil's advocate and how I developed the practice. I can't help but see how much is not offering me anything to do. It's not offering me any technique. It's just talking. It's just, so that would be my issue. And I'm putting issue because I don't have a problem, because I'm gonna go do my practice, folks, and I'm gonna feel good. So it's not a problem. But The issue that I take with the whole world just entering the fifth dimension of enlightenment is there's no technique. And then as I go along, there's no empowerment, there's no responsibility. It's just, it's just happening, guys. Woo! And I can't, I don't want that. I don't want to just enter the fifth dimension. I want to take responsibility for my mind. I love the feeling of empowered attention. I want that. I don't want anybody to give me their, in air quotes. So does that make sense? This is a distinct characteristic. I like the word distinct rather than unique. How about distinct? I'll change that when I'm done with the slides. It is a distinct characteristic of the transcendental embodiment approach and the core methodology of T, therefore mind, space, and everything else. Technique based. Can anybody give me an example of a technique?
Feet on the floor. I feel my feet on the floor.
Sure. I like that one. Attention on your feet on the floor. Is that abstract ideology? Why is that not abstract?
Because I have a feet and I have a floor.
And you have attention. And they're either in alignment or they're not, right?
Well, I'm placing my awareness on them or I'm not.
Right. That's what I meant by alignment. Sorry. They're either together or they're yeah. All right. So that is
feeling, I think with the other practices, there's a lot of focus on feeling without the way of getting there. And,
exactly.
And so it gets lost. So being in my body and using my senses is practical and it makes sense, as opposed to where I want my head, what dimension I want my head to be, or what frequency I want to be vibrating at. That comes as a result of my practice, not
as a result.
It's not a technique. Being in the fifth dimension is not a technique. It's a result. A frequency is a result. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Donna. Yeah. So I'm not, I love possibility. I have a very creative mind and I love it. And I love creativity. I like the idea of the fifth dimension and all of these things. You know, it all sounds good. I'm okay with that. I like opinions and ideas, and you know, that's all good. The hypothesis is what it is before it becomes theory. So I'm okay with this process. I love it. You know, it's exploration. It's exciting. It's creative. It's infinite potential. However, it is important to show that there has to be a delivery mechanism. There has to be a way to get there. Mushrooms can tell you that too. Yeah.
Well, I have noticed that as I got older, and I think a lot of people, a lot of women that I know around my age, over the years, through just life, you have lost touch with your body. So you're not feeling your senses. You're not, you know, we're kind of taught in this society to live in our heads, and to lose touch with your body is an awful shame. You know, to lose touch with movement and dance, and just to be all right, to sort of know your body, to get to know your body. I feel like I've got to know my body through the T practice because I'm focusing on my senses more and started to get into the sea and maybe move a bit more. But to know that, even like Donna was saying about the pain in her shoulder, having pains and all in your body, it's not some mystery. It's not some, the body's not some mysterious thing, and yet it is. But to get to know it again has been a real blessing. I have felt that through this practice, because I'm getting in touch, using my senses or focusing on the senses has helped that.
Yep, makes perfect sense. It's intrinsic of being human. All right, that's perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Ida. All right, so it's technique based. So that's the delivery mechanism. You know, that's interesting. I don't want to get too much into that because that would be more towards Seers practice, especially hydrostasy. Because one of the feelings that I focus on is, I'm not being cheeky, but it's the universal attention. That's what I call it. The feeling that I'm not just a body, that my body is the delivery mechanism. There is a big difference in identification to the vessel, and the vessel is a part of the totality. Do you see what I mean? That's a different feeling. And so someday maybe we can talk about that feeling of infinity, the feeling of being a timeless creature, in a manner of speaking. It has a specific feeling associated to it that if you highlight it, that feeling, grows in your momentum. It gains momentum and acceleration, and you feel it even in a more profound way. And I just say profound, I guess profound just means more difficult to describe. New-ish, the instrument being played. But
I think of what Ida pointed out is that existing without factoring in that you are operating within a body is existing in an extreme. And so many of us are our thoughts are, I mean, we can over-identify with being a body, but we can also over-identify with a thought and a belief, which is changeable. So the balance is off when we exclude our body from the equation.
yes, so going from one extreme to the other of excluding the body is also just as erroneous. It's just going from one extreme to the other. Yeah. So the body is a valid part of the human experience. And that doesn't mean I have to identify with it as all of who I am. It's an aspect of the totality. However, attention itself is the totality. It's what makes up everything. It's just attention and consciousness is the result of that magnifying glass that I call brain. But not just the body. Exactly. I have a body, but I'm not just my body. I have thoughts, but I'm not just thoughts. I am attention itself. I am the I am. When the I am is filtered, or you could say focused through the lens of the human body, mind, and spirit, it creates attention and consciousness. And that consciousness is the same as everything else, and attention the same as everything else. The experience different, the body different, the memories different, the preferences different, the likes and dislikes different. See what I mean? Okay, so moving along, this practice is techniques based, and that's great. It is the act of allowing. So one of the most important aspects of this practice is it just goes back to paying attention to the now moment on purpose, and that's it. Ultimately, that's it. That's ultimately what we're looking to do. Eventually, I do think that the power of positive thinking is limited. Positive is and I'm using that as a categorization in a manner of speaking, the power of positive thinking. But thinking that is going towards the present moment could be viewed as positive. If we're looking at it in terms of Freudian psychology, it's beneficial to the species, it's beneficial to the individual, therefore we would view it as good. That's why we put that word there, good, because it's going to be beneficial to us, and I can dig that. I'm okay with that dynamic. So in that regard, it's very good. But this practice is not manipulating. You're not trying to change behavior. You're not trying. So Ida, when you go through the evening, we're not trying to do anything. It's am I present 2 degrees or not? That's it. That's what this practice is, and that's the simplicity of it. That's the focus of it. That's the purity of it. That's why it's not follow earnest. It's your attention. Where are you putting it?
Hydrostasis. I get lost in a TV drama and forget about my body and everything, and then breathe in, remember, remember it's coming back, and put my hands on the settee, feel the sofa, feel the material, center myself again, and then I'm away again for another while and back again, and that's the way it goes in the evening for me.
I'm familiar with that. there are tricks of attention that you can use while watching TV. So it's fun to play with your tricks of attention depending on the circumstances. So play with them a little bit. What are things that you can do while watching TV, while giving a lecture online, for example? Okay, so moving along, does it make sense in terms of the act of allowing? We are not resisting. We are not trying to control. This is the only thing that I have ever seen that I believe is consistent with the act of allowing and not trying to control. We're not trying to change habits. We're not trying to change personality. We're not looking for our higher selves, lower selves, middle selves, medium selves, larger. I don't know. It's nothing like that. Where is my mind and did I put it there? That's it. Does that make sense? Any questions about that before we move along? The act of allowing? Allowing what? Our alignment to the moment, our ability to adapt to it. Adaptation implies movement. Movement means with or against how everything else is moving. So a tiger has entered the room. That is how the world around you is currently moving. Does that make sense? The tiger in the room is a part of how the world around you is currently moving. Jerry, does that make sense? A tiger has just for some unknown reason walked in the kitchen or wherever you are, a tiger. It is a hungry tiger, has not eaten tiger. That tiger has entered the room. It is prowling. How would somebody use this practice? Well, I mean, we could go into a whole spiel about how this practice could benefit them if a physical tiger was entering the room. But that's something to adapt to, folks. That's something that we're going to have to go with rather than against. So passivity would be like, no, there's no tiger. I'll be fine. I'm sure I am the tiger whisperer after all, and nothing ever bad has happened to tiger whisperers. Yeah, okay. So the act of allowing is not trying to control, it's not trying to manipulate even your own mind. Your attention, you are it. So we're not even trying to think certain words. The words just point back to the practice, point back to deliberate attention. Where's my mind? Where's the light? Where's the present moment? I can be mindful, I can be present. And then we get into the voice of power with that. But all right, so any questions about the act of allowing? This is often talked about, but there's no delivery for it. There's so many gurus and masters who have talked to me personally about the act of allowing, and the way that they talk about it literally makes no sense because it's still just attempting to manipulate and control. All right, T, and yes, I hear an unmuted mic.
I was just going to say it is in other delivery forms, it is more about what not to do, and you can't not do something. It's about what not to do, and okay, so how do I not do that? Now I've focused on what I'm supposed to not do, and now I'm upset because that's all I can focus on is what I'm doing wrong.
Right, which, as you mentioned, is focusing on not doing something is a cognitive affair. It's a direction of your thought. So you can't not do something. There has to be a delivery mechanism, an action-based something that is producing something, creating something, as opposed to thou shalt not. Thou shalt not kill is the result of something.
Exactly.
There's got to be some
clear
steps.
Your mind. Clear your mind without how to clear your mind. The fox walking quote is, followed by the technique that clears your mind. Clearing your mind is abstract to me.
It can be, yeah. So yeah, it is abstract to me too, because you say clear your mind, I'm like, what? Like
quiet your mind. Okay, all that does for me is make me notice all the noise in my mind.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful.
Right. That's a good point. Okay, so some other aspects, I'm just gonna, because I'm hoping to keep this to about an hour 15. I'd like to be between an hour and 30 minutes, just depending on the discussion. But T and the T approach, the core T approach, which extends to the Mindspace method, the Mindspace Academy method, and it also applies to T, the complete practice, hydrostasy, of course, is it's simple to understand. Honestly, this is all simple to understand. We keep going over it because it's not easy to do. And the reason it's not easy to do is because we've been spending our entire lives not doing it. It's pretty simple. Any questions about simplicity? Where was your mind and did you put it there? That is this practice. Like, I can't be any more simple than that. It's not the 15 things that you shall not do and the 700 meridians that you have to remember, and you don't have to spend time with the ancient master to learn his deft touch secrets just as he passes. That's like, that all makes great story and shit. I get it, but let's not confuse fairy tale for where is my mind and did I put it there? And I love fairy tales. Goodness gracious, I love them. See, that's the thing. I just love it all, but it's not my practice. Simple to understand. This practice is super duper simple, easy to understand. It's technique based. It can be shown to anybody. The reason we have classes upon classes is because we have spent decades upon decades doing the exact opposite, not just not doing it, doing the exact opposite. Yeah. All right, so it's simple to understand, and it's also principle-based. So I have lots of opinions, and unless you're practicing hydrostasy, you're not going to hear a lot of them, because this isn't a really, and someone say, well, Ernest, you talking about principle is your opinion of principle. Fine, go do whatever you want to do. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do or to get into arguments or conversations about the nature of yada yada. So a principle is something that I personally can observe everywhere in everything. And I actually could write a really good paper about it, because that's what papers do. They provide evidence of where are you experiencing this. That's why I talk about it so well, because I've seen it, I'm doing it. So I have a lot of experience to share. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, this practice is based on sound principle, such as the principle of transience. Everything is moving. I have opinions about that, I guess. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. But this practice isn't based on Ernest's opinion of principle. It's just based on the principle. You see what I mean? It is different, but it is a unique characteristic of T. Okay, not unique, distinct. It is a distinct characteristic and a distinct core feature of everything that I personally share. If you do the practice, you see the principle. Yeah. Yep. And if you need to see the principle to do the practice, you have to do the practice to see the principle. So it's kind of like you just got to do it. Any questions about principle-based? Principles. The principle of transience. The principle of attention itself. The principle of balance. Okay. One of the distinct characteristics of T is that it works right away, but you have to continue doing it for it to maintain. It's not getting there, it's not leveling up, you have not arrived. And I personally, I don't care if anybody else views me differently. I don't give two cares about that. Like, I can't spend time in that cognition caring about it. I'm too busy doing my practice. My third pillar is active. So it works right away, and the method works the second you do it, but with this dynamic, it doesn't work at all when you don't. And this is a dynamic, it's a principle. So the dynamic itself never changes. In principle, it works when you don't, it works when you do it, and it doesn't when you don't. And I will be 110 years old, and my practice will either be working because I'm doing it, or it won't because I'm not. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. It is complementary in nature. So let's say you have a ton of beliefs. As long as your belief is not predetermination, this practice can be complementary. So if you, what's a belief? Astrology. I think there's so many ways to apply tea to astrology. I may not agree. Don't ask me if I agree. You don't have to ask me my opinion. If you do, I might tell you, but otherwise, I love possibility. I love imagination. I love the idea of all of these different things that could be potentially occurring. Quantum physics, I dig it. Astrology, I find it very interesting. I dig it. New age spirituality, 5D, transdimensionally leveling up. I actually find this stuff, some of it mildly interesting, some of it more interesting than other things. That's okay. I like all that. I think that's all groovy. So Jerry, I do have 33 principles, but T's foundation is based on 4: the nature of attention, what you do with attention, the principle of balance, and the act of allowing. Those are 4 of the primary principles in T. So there's all kinds of things. I mean, you could be, as long as the Christian belief isn't including predetermination, saying that your actions have already been determined, your attention is, I can actually prove to you that that's not true. Place your attention somewhere and leave it there for however long that was not a predetermined thing. You did that. You can choose to do that. And then someone will say, well, that was predetermined. And it's like, okay, well, fine. Go do what you want to do. I don't have to talk about this. Complementary in nature. Does this make sense? Lisa likes walking on the beach. Tea is complementary. Michael wants to have a successful business. Tea is complementary. Michael wants to, feel enlightenment. Notice I say not realize or be enlightened. You feel the lightness and unencumbered nature of a relaxed mind, or you don't. Active, folks. Tea is active. Even the philosophy is active. But it could be complementary to that. Ida loves painting. She loves Irish stuff. It could be complementary to that. Do you see what I mean? As long as it's not predetermination, you can find a way to make it a part of your tricks of attention. That's your job to do, though. That's called your creative output. It's all, and there we go. It's creative in nature. So when you make this practice your own, you're creating that. So this practice is not you follow me. It is, where is your mind and did you put it there? It's not where is your mind relative to my mind and is it the same? It's where is your mind and did you put it there? That's the creative aspect of this practice. Does that make sense? I would like at a certain point and I'm just, you don't have to, it's just for fun really, but especially with hydrostasy and things like that, I'd like you to create your own practice. I do think that teaching is a part of this. You don't have to, you never have to do anything, but I think it could be important. I think it could be fun. And my teacher, and it's a tradition to name your student. Well, I'm not going to name anybody, but if you name your practice, I think that would be a cool tradition. We'll see. Tradition can't be forced, but I created my own practice and named it. I called it hydrostasy. Maybe Donna will have her own tea practice and name it, and it will be called Donna Practice. Okay, so it's creative in nature. It is an empowerment approach. Goodness gracious. You do this, not me. Isn't that great? Eventually, you shouldn't be paying anybody for your practice. You could support somebody, you could donate to somebody, you could do whatever you want, but you don't have to. It's not a necessity. Once you're doing this practice, you're doing it. This is an empowerment approach. Your personal power, not mine. I'm not doing anything for you, really. Thanks for coming to the session today. I didn't do that for you. I made it available. That's it. Any questions about empowerment approach? We're starting to steamroll through these PowerPoints. All right, so the mind space mindfulness method, T, the complete practice, T is a core methodology, hydrostasy is earnest's practice, is an empowerment, even hydrostasy is an empowerment approach. I'll just share with you in vivid detail what I do. I never tell you to do it. You can do whatever the hell you want. It exists independent from iconic figures. So I'm just gonna, I don't have to compare to other practices that do this. T does not. And I know that this is a not doing, Donna. You can't not do something. This is just an explanation, but that T does not have a figure that we will all look up to and say, that's it. There is no deity figure. There is no guru. There is no master of attention. You are the master of attention when your third pillar is active. You are the master of the universe when your third pillar is active, folks. Just saying. And that's mastery of attention. Where is your mind and did you put it there? If the answer is yes, you are the master. If the answer is no, you are not. Active mastery. Holy cow, there's another new concept. Active mastery as opposed to abstract ideological mastery that is used to essentially just be, I don't want to be cheeky, but it's a form of advertisement. Any questions, comments, or concerns about any of this so far? It exists independent of iconic figures. There is no Buddha in the T practice. There is no Jesus in the T practice. There is no, I don't know, deity. Does that make sense? Any questions about that slide? I could read it. So the slide says, you are the iconic figure here. Oh, I posted this on Facebook. This is not you follow me. I can share how this is done, but you have to do it. There is no deity figure or icon of perfection in this practice. We're not looking up to anybody. Nobody. You can look to me for pointers. You know, I can share my practice with you. I can shine my light brightly and share my inspiration. I can do all of that. I can't do the practice for you, and that's why it's an empowerment approach. And I'm not going to be your vision to strive for. That is a form of cognition that is comparing and contrasting. And if it's done, if it just occurs to you, again, it just occurred to you, go on, you know. But if a person starts to think that way and it starts to get out of balance, it will exist in an extreme and it will cause suffering. And then before you know it, we're worshiping somebody. And we're drinking Kool-Aid with a group of people, and that Kool-Aid isn't good for us. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? No deity figure. It exists independently from, and so Donna, I was still able to word that without a negative. It exists independently from iconic figures. Yes, Donna, I had you in mind. We can't not do something. So this practice exists independently from iconic figures, gurus, masters, deities, all that jazz. There may be group leaders, somebody who has been designated to lead the group. And that is the end of part 1. Any questions about any of these slides? Because these are the distinct characteristics and some of the unique characteristics of everything that is T. And to go back to that, by everything that is T, I mean that second slide where we were looking at this. Everything that is T is all of those slides. The mindfulness approach that I personally will offer to the world as a part of my creative output and a part of my responsibility to the evolution of species, because I do take responsibility for that. This is all the core aspects of that. Everything will be a reflection of this, whether it's hydrostasy, whether it's the rings of power, whether it's hunting power, whether it's any of that stuff. Does that make sense? And so if you'd like to know more about T and what it is, wouldn't you agree that this is a great synopsis or kind of an overview, in a manner of speaking, of some of the distinct characteristics of this approach. Okay, good. Well, yeah, I mean, it really does. I guess if we go to this slide, I don't have to have expectations because of this principle. It works right away and it works when I do it. So I don't have to get caught and lost in all of these expectations, because expectations are usually a very specific thing. It's never just directional like that. Well, I don't want to say never. Typically for people, it's not directional like that. Like, am I going towards the third pillar? That's good and enough. Am I going away from the third pillar? Okay, back to the practice. That's good and that's enough. Expectations is usually this long list of ideas and beliefs and thought.
And the right clothes to wear when you're
Oh,
going
yeah.
to the group, and the right way to sit, and the right horrible expectations.
Yeah, that all sounded icky.
It
There's no.
also assumes that there is a standard by which we can all, if you're all sit in the same, like everything is subject to the individual perception and what place that person is arriving in, and the variations are infinite. So this practice eliminates the need for everyone to contort themselves into something that doesn't fit with who they are, because the principles, it really helped me in class to learn the principles, because my mind at the time was analytical and scientific, and I want to know the reason. And so when there's a principle to see, I was able to shut my mind off easier, because there's the principle of momentum, there's the principle of, and then I could let go of having to place a principle on everything. But it fit for everything I did, and it fit for everything you did, and it fit for everything Ida did. And those three examples of different human beings have completely a myriad of different perspectives and points of attention and the way we experience the world. So it could apply to everyone. But the principles helped me in the beginning to quiet the mind.
I can understand. Yep, that makes sense to me. And I'll be talking more about principles, but that is a lot of talking. So, if I'm going to talk, and this is obviously, so this is the first week of the Mindspace Academy, and I haven't really, publicized it. I'm not really going to do that. I'm going to kind of just be consistent, do, constant sharing into my pages. And I think if people find value, they'll start sharing it around, or they won't. But I'll test that theory. It's a theory and I'll find out. But ultimately, my goal with everything is just to create the library, because my highest vision is the art stand. And I would love for people to be able to sign up to a course. I would love for people to be able to, see my laptop on my stand and take a card, and you can go to my website at home if you don't have money for a book today. You can check out my free YouTube, and you can check out my free Facebook page, and you can check out all my free, videos, and it's plenty. And so when I offer something for free, it's not, here's something of no value just to lead you to something of value. No. The free stuff is everything. The stuff that I charge for is typically the extra stuff, like my specific practice. I don't have to share that really, but I'm going to. And so that, is handled a little bit differently. Principles keep the cherry picking and self-hustle at bay. It can. What keeps the self-hustling at bay is cognitive attention training. That's the only thing that can really to help with cherry picking is cognitive attention training. And if I were to take Jerry's statement and make it T practice, in order for me to see, and in order for the cognitive attention training to be there, I have to have tricks of attention. One thing that I could be doing is telling myself of the principles in words so that I can redirect away from the act of cherry picking. Does that make sense, Jerry? So if in this moment you're present because of your cognitive attention, and then you use words to remind yourself, hey, you're hustling yourself, homie. This is just cherry. And I'm not telling you to do this, but you have a cheeky inner guru as well. So maybe it would tell you that, hey, you're fucking up, go the other direction, back towards peace. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, back towards peace. You see what I mean? But you can recite those principles to yourself. You can talk to yourself in a productive manner. Reminding yourself of principles is an excellent example of productive cognition. It's also an excellent example of activating inner guru. And it's something that I would tell you to do in recommendation, at least in hydrostasy. I'll tell you exactly how I do it. Does that make sense? So do you see how I took principle in words and turned it into practice in words? That's the key. Can you use those words to point back to the practice to help redirect away from cherry picking? Otherwise, we're just thinking about cherry picking. We're just understanding cherry picking. All right, any questions, comments, and concerns? So from now on, and this was all the practical aspects of tea, these are the not necessarily unique, they're less represented, I think. That's an opinion perhaps, but I find it to be far less represented in other practices. But these are the determining qualities, the distinct characteristics of this approach and this practice and the way that I teach. And so,
Question.
yes. Yeah, please.
And I think I've asked it a million times, and I don't know why. I don't know why my thinking gets caught up here. But the act of allowing, to me, I keep seeing allowing. The act of allowing is a virtue and not an act. If I am deliberately focused, can you just differentiate? I don't want to use my words.
Act equal active. Act equal active. So the act of allowing is either occurring right now because you're engaging the present. So I have gone over this, and we are getting caught up on other people's words and the way that other people talk about things. But so when I use my pipe example, my mind is either paying attention to the present moment or it's not. If it's not, that is a form of resistance, R. So if I'm adding resistance, I cannot possibly be going with the present moment rather than against it. If I'm adding resistance, I'm very likely trying to control, and that is not the act of allowing either. So it becomes an act when it is actively occurring. I say the act of allowing so that allowing doesn't become some sort of abstract, philosophical, ideological thing that we just talk about.
So it's another way of saying placing my mind deliberately.
Yes, but here's the thing. So I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to go into a further practice.